able to help them think through their questions about God just was so energizing, and kind of, it felt so meaningful when I was referred to as the Muffin Man for the next 2 years pretty relentlessly. Year sevens would run up to me, who I'd never spoken to in my life, and go, "Do you know the Muffin Man?" I've never got the impression that empathy was his main driver, and he was sort of going to ask you questions until you crumble or get married, you discover that your family's weird and you always thought it was totally normal. Blue tacked up a bit of paper in the kitchen and wrote down every good question that I asked. Mate, that's genius. I'm gonna use that sometime. When you see Jesus interact with people, he is remarkably unhurried. The only thing you need to come to God is nothing, but a lot of people don't have it. As a culture, we've been tempted to put that kind of weight exclusively on romance, and actually it can't take that. You need a family that's bigger than that.
Boys and girls, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to my podcast, Coffee's on me, David Quan. This is the first episode recorded after exams, and while I feel exhausted from my last one a couple of days ago, I'm also filled with great gratitude for this discussion. Before introducing a very special guest, I wish again to thank you for almost 1,500 podcast downloads. Your engagement on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to podcasts has been much appreciated. Please do consider leaving a review or messaging me to nominate a guest. So today I am joined by Mike Hood. Mike grew up in Warwickshire before studying English literature at Selwyn College, Cambridge, where he now lives with his wife Rachael. In Cambridge, that is, not Selwyn. He is an amateur spoken word poet and was a finalist in the UK Poetry Slam at the Royal Albert Hall. And he has worked since graduating trying to help people ask and find answers to the biggest questions about the meaning of life and God. First with university students around Britain, and sometimes in Belarus, and now with people of all ages in Cambridge. Mike, welcome to my podcast, Coffee's on me, David Quan.
Thank you, David. It's an absolute joy to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
I've been looking forward to this discussion for a very long time, Mike, and I thought about where to start, and I still haven't figured out where to start, so why don't you just talk about what has been capturing your attention recently?
That's a great question. I mean, we were just talking about this a minute ago as I was arriving, that I've been writing an essay recently about poetry slams, trying to sort of understand why poetry slams are so interesting and powerful. So I've been thinking a fair bit about the power of kind of speaking and being heard by other people, I guess reflecting a bit on why I found it so exciting to get involved in poetry slams and stuff as well.
So for context, what is a poetry slam?
Yeah, so it's a weird thing, really. It's a poetry competition. It kind of started out almost as like a bar game designed to force poets to perform poetry that normal people actually liked back in the 80s, and it's kind of spread and become a real thing. But basically it's a competition where anyone can sign up. You get 3 minutes to perform a piece of poetry that you've written yourself, and then a random selection of 5 people in the audience score it from 0 to 10, and the highest scoring poet wins. Maybe I've never won anything substantial. Usually it's just a chance to be in a different poetry slam.
You once mentioned that if someone offered you a job as a spoken word poet, you would be keen. Has that attitude, or would you still say that's true?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it's hard. I really love my actual job, but I love performing poetry so much. I mean, it's such an exciting thing to do, to kind of engage with a room of people and try and kind of draw them into something and move them. And all the best spoken word poems, I think, actually try and kind of move you somewhere and help you to see something. And there's something just really exciting about doing that. Yeah.
So, from my understanding, you didn't really take this that seriously until university, and one of your friends, I think, introduced you to Kate Tempest.
Yes, now Kate Tempest, but yeah.
Yep. Would you be able to talk about what that was like being introduced to her work, and why her work, out of all the other authors or poets that you've studied in English literature throughout school, what differentiated her work?
Yeah, so it was just it was powerful and kind of stirring in a way that I hadn't often come across before. It was, I guess, because it was performed, it had a kind of magnetism and energy about it that is very hard to pick up from your GCSE poetry anthology. It kind of is a lot more like theatre than it is like what I'd experienced of poetry until that point. And also I think it's sort of a lot of what was in those poems was really resonating for me with the sort of sense that there's something more than what we normally sort of get by with in life. There's a brilliant poem called Bubble Muzzle that's all about kind of being stuck in the bubble of our kind of everyday grind, and it's basically this big sort of call to lift our heads up and see if there's not more to our existence. And I was kind of listening to those poems going, yes, there is, please tell people that, tell me that.
So this idea expression, I think it's so interesting, because as humans we have an innate desire to express ourselves and to communicate with other people. Spoken word poems are one way of doing so. Throughout your upbringing, when did you feel most alive in terms of expressions and communication? Was it through writing? Was it through coffee chats? Was it through, church? Like, when or how were you most alive in terms of expression?
That's a great question. I did a lot of like youth sort of theatre and stuff like that growing up, and really enjoyed that. I think I probably did feel most alive when I was, initially I think it was when I got to write. I wrote plays, and seeing people actually perform a play that I've written, that was a really deeply kind of energizing moment. But then actually I think I sort of discovered a new level of that when I was 16. I went and helped on a kind of kids summer camp that run by sort of our church and some other churches, and I found myself having conversations with some of the boys in my kind of dorm. Not that it was literally a dorm, but in my sort of small group on that. And I found that being able to help them think through their questions about God just was so energizing, and kind of it felt so meaningful when I saw them kind of making steps forward, I guess, in understanding how God felt about them and who He was. And so I came back from that like, can I do that all the time? Am I allowed to do that in school? And ended up starting a bunch of kind of discussion events in my sixth form that were just sort of giving people a bunch of donuts at lunchtime and asking a sort of philosophical question of some sort, and doing that kind of conversation thing. I found exciting in an entirely different way. Actually kind of drawing people in and seeing what they thought, and then engaging with that and trying to stretch the way people were thinking about stuff. I love that.
So you were 16. How old were the children you were engaging with?
When the stuff I was doing at school, that was mostly people my own age, but it was just, I was opening up to the whole secondary school, so it was anybody that wanted to come. So you get a fun mixture of mostly sixth formers who knew me, and then a couple of random year sevens who just wanted the donuts, and a bunch of people in between.
Right, so you set up that initiative. Did you pay for the donuts yourself?
I think it may well have been one of the many things where, in theory, I was paying for it, but in practice, I was getting my parents to pay for it without them really thinking too hard about it.
That's really interesting. I mean, not many 15, 16-year-olds during school would set up something like this, and especially, thinking that your friends or students a little older would come, and here you are talking about big philosophical questions. It's not like a sports club and let's watch football, let's watch basketball, but let's talk about the meaning of life. And do you remember some of the memorable sessions, and what were the questions, and what was the vibe like? What did those sessions look like? What did it feel like? What did it sound like?
Yeah, well, there's one that I'll never forget because it became infamous. So the second time I did anything, I wanted to do one on kind of gratitude versus like entitlement. Do we feel like everything that we have, we deserve it, or do we receive life as a gift? And I basically I decided to call it "Do I Deserve This Muffin?" And I just stood up in the assembly to invite people to it with a muffin in my hand, and that turns out to have been a major mistake. I mean, people came, which was excellent, but I was referred to as the Muffin Man for the next 2 years, pretty relentlessly. Year sevens would run up to me, who I'd never spoken to in my life, and go, "Do you know the Muffin Man?" It was excellent, but the actual discussions themselves, people would turn up, and I'd have a bunch of like discussion questions on a little bit of paper, and people would sit in small groups and chat about questions for a bit, and then I'd get people to say some of the stuff they thought, and then most of the time there was like, I'd have nicked a DVD of like a 10-minute sort of thoughtful video and play that. Some of the times I just did it myself, and then I'd go back to discussions in small groups, and we did stuff about forgiveness, whether forgiveness was a good idea or not. We did stuff about generosity. We did one called "Arguing About God is a Waste of Time," that was entertaining in its own way. Did a whole bunch of stuff.
Before you started, what did you hope to achieve in those sessions?
I mean, ultimately, the thing that got me really excited about it was realising that I could actually, from the thing with the kind of summer camp, realising that actually I could be involved in somebody else thinking about God for the first time, and maybe even I could be part of the journey of somebody who didn't know God coming to meet him, and that I found ridiculously exciting as an idea. I was like, I mean, that's so life-changing if I can be involved in that. And so the kind of the motivation was, I figured if I get up and say I would like to hold a conversation about whether or not you should believe in God, I'm not sure many of my mates will be interested in that, because they're sort of culturally encouraged to think that probably they don't need to think about that, it's not a big deal. But I thought, actually, even for me, when I've only just really got to know Christianity, it's changing the way that I think about all sorts of stuff that everyone has to think about all the time. It changes the way I think about forgiveness when people hurt me. It changes the way I think about my pocket money, and what I'm meant to do with that, and how I feel about it. And I thought, if I actually just help people start thinking more deeply about life and what they care about and what they believe and what they value, that's a really good first step for people. So that was the heart, really.
That's great. That's a very selfless kind of reason to do this. And I think the school I went to, inter-year level relationship was a very big deal. And if you look at my photo wall, it's all about forging meaningful relationships across different age groups with people from all sorts of backgrounds and different interests. And when I was a younger student, I can distinctively remember so many of the older boys who have sat down with me to grab lunch and to ask me questions and to talk through my hobbies and what they have done. And when I got to obviously their stage, it's very much about paying that forward and giving back. And when I was younger, I always thought that I was the recipient of the help, right? And in many ways I was, because I learned from their example. But when I actually had a chance to be a leader and to lead those groups, I realised that speaking to the younger students had impacted me in so many ways, and so they have shaped me profoundly. And I know I'm not expressing myself too well. I have used up all my words in my essay for my exam.
Yeah, it's very impressive that you're stringing sentences together at this stage.
But kids are great thinkers, and kids are funny. They see things in a sometimes naive, but also sometimes in quite a deep way. And I was wondering, from leading those groups, what did you learn from, say, the 2 year 7s who got the donuts and muffin, from people who you perhaps wouldn't have interacted with before, and who surprised you in those sessions?
Yeah, there was one particularly. The one guy that I particularly remember was a guy who was maybe not quite year 7. I think he was maybe year 9, so he was a few years younger than me. And he I think probably came along to begin with for the food, and then after a while I started doing some stuff with other, sort of collaborating with other Christians as well, and we did stuff that was more explicitly sort of inviting people to ask their questions about faith or whatever. He came to a lot of that stuff as well, and it felt like he was there to have an argument, basically, because he just enjoyed. I mean, to be fair, I did it as well. I always have enjoyed arguing with people who are older than me, and I think he really enjoyed that too.
Yep.
And he really surprised me, because he kept coming long enough that we actually really got to know him, and he really got to know us. And I remember one time, actually, we used to have a sort of weekly meeting as well that wasn't so much a big complicated thing. It was just anyone that wanted to come, and we'd look at the Bible together and pray for each other and stuff. And, and one time he came along to that, and I prayed for him, and he told me later that had been a really transformative kind of moment for him, and I don't know what it was about it. I think it might well have been just that some of those prayers were answered as I was asking them, but he kind of went from this very here to be obnoxious and funny and take the mick and argue with everything you say, to someone who was really asking questions and really wanted to find out for himself. And it was really fascinating seeing that kind of journey, and the way that relationship made such a difference to him.
Would you say that was one of the instances where it really highlighted the importance of empathy, and how people can appear quite hard on the outside, but everyone has such a soft spot and that inner humanity of them? And when we show people kindness, and when we show people love and goodness, that people open up, and there's such a beautiful side to all of us. Yeah,
totally. I definitely think, I mean, many times, and that was probably the most sort of significant one where I was able to, it was the most kind of meaningful relationship in that context. But I've seen time and again that you can start a conversation very sort of antagonistically, but actually if you're willing to take the time to sit down and keep asking questions back, that's the best thing, I think, is to keep asking questions back, so that you're not just defending yourself, you're actually trying to hear them and where they're coming from, and why do they feel
the Socratic method.
I mean, I don't know much about Socrates. I've never got the impression that empathy was his main driver, and he was sort of going to ask you questions until you crumbled into dust. But I found that actually, if you keep talking and you kind of try and listen as well as trying to speak, often you find yourself in a surprisingly I mean, even in conversations where neither of you have changed your opinion at all, you can often find that actually you've developed a really deep respect for each other, because just the act of listening to another person is really it's really powerful and kind of humanising.
I want to hang in that context of those kind of dialogic environment, because I really believe that so much of our character development comes in relation to other people and what we learn from others. And so much of my learning is shaped by the people in my community, and they're my parents, they're my teachers, mentors, coaches, older boys, role models, the students, younger students. So when you were in school, it seemed like you were already aware of the importance to relate to other people and build relationships. What gave you that instinct to connect with other people? Because a lot of kids are very reserved at that stage. They're very much focused on their own little thing, their sport, maybe a little hobby. But it sounded like you really took the initiative to get to know other people on beyond a superficial level.
That's sort of something that you never really ask. I don't know. I've never really asked myself that. And I guess a lot of it, just would be. I'm really grateful to my parents for the way that they. I guess partly the way they talked to us, me and my big brother. It turns out since I have been with Rachael, it's turned out that it's. My family's really weird. I think that probably happens to a lot of people when they get into a relationship or get married. You discover that your family's weird, and you always thought it was totally normal. But it turns out that my family is weirdly kind of discursive. We love to talk about something deep. Admittedly, half of the time. So my mum's she works in tax. She's like an accountant. And my brother trained and worked for a long time as an economist. So quite often I've got absolutely no clue what's going on in the deep discussions that are happening, because it's literally about fiscal policy, and I've got no idea. But I think I kind of grew up used to the idea that you could talk about what you thought. Actually, my mum and dad did a thing when I was younger where it turns out, in retrospect, they've explained to me that they did it because they were worried that my big brother was sort of always knew everything and I didn't know everything, and they thought I was going to get like an inferiority complex about how, I mean, he's unbelievably smart, but they blue tacked up a bit of paper in the kitchen and wrote down every good question that I asked.
Wow.
And stupid stuff like, when they print money, who do they give it to? Things like that. And I still think that's really cool, because that was them going, actually,
I love that.
Yeah, we want to encourage you to ask good questions, even if it's not just cool to know the answer to questions people ask you. So I think a lot of it I should be grateful to them, really.
Wow, that's amazing. I've never heard a parent or a teacher do that, and I can see it being such an effective and visible technique, because it shows, number one, that they care about what you have to say, which for a kid, I think that means the world, that an adult cares about what you say. And secondly, having it there and constantly just seeing it and knowing that if you are thinking and if you're expressing yourself, then it matters. Do you remember your reaction to the first time they introduced this exercise or idea, or the first time they put up the question, like, how did that change you? Like, how were you affected?
We're going far too far back into the deep mists of the past for me to be able to properly...
But the fact that you remember that even now shows that it would have had an impact on the way you see the world and relate to the world.
Yeah, and I think actually a lot of my later kind of enthusiasm about asking questions and having discussions was shaped by my dad ended up getting sort of sucked into running a youth thing at our church, where he said to us afterwards that he'd been praying for me and my big brother for a while, that there would be something at the church that would like help us to get to know other teenagers there, and would help us think through our faith and stuff. And then the youth worker called my dad and said, I'd like to start a youth group, but I need somebody to help me. Would you like to do it? And he was like, oh, flip, I don't think I can get out of this. If I've literally been praying for it to exist, I should probably help. But the way that they did that was really to ask questions about what you thought about something and get you to start thinking it through, and then to show you a bit of, you know, something that Jesus said or something the Bible said, and get you to dig into that and try and work out what that said, and then see how that sort of challenged or supported or kind of changed the thing you'd been saying a second ago.
Yeah.
And I just found that really sort of thought-provoking and sort of transformative, because it was getting me to actually say, how do I genuinely see the world? How do I think about God, or how do I think about my relationships with other people? And then it was letting Jesus speak into that and blow my mind, rather than it just being, I have my life and then I come and do a religious thing and nod my head as you say nice religious things, and then I go back to living my life. And that has been hugely, I've basically been copying that for the rest, like ever since, in most of my life has consisted in trying to copy that method of inviting people into that conversation and then letting Jesus speak into it.
We will go more into Christianity and religion in general, but before then I just want to ask a bit more about your upbringing and childhood, and what were your other hobbies? Like, were you sporty, musical? Obviously you had the drama stuff, but what else did you do?
I'm really grateful that I got to do a bunch of fun stuff, you know. I played football, and I played violin until I was in sort of year 9, but that's the one thing that I'm sort of grateful to my parents for getting me to play an instrument. I'm very grateful for that. I'm gutted that it was the violin, you know. Could I not have learnt the saxophone, how much better would my life be right now? But no, the main things were theatre and actually circus skills as well. Like the youth theatre that I was at was unusually brilliant at circus stuff, so I grew up doing trapeze and all sorts of fun stuff like that, which I'm really grateful for, because I realise that's pretty freakish, not in the literal sense, but yeah.
And who were you friends with? Like, did you have multiple friendship groups, like some from drama, some from the circus group, some from music, some from school? How did you know, if you had a birthday party, saying like year 6, what would be the proportion of invitees from different scenes of your life?
It was actually, that was a really enriching thing about the theatre stuff that I was involved in, was that at school it was very, you know, it's very like, what year you are in is this huge definitive thing, and it's very unusual to have really deep friendships with people in
different
other years.
Yep.
But at the youth theatre, it didn't matter what year you were in. So I spent a lot of my sort of early teenage years aspiring to be really good friends with a bunch of 14, 15, 16-year-olds.
Wow.
Which I'm glad that I was forced by being at school to actually also be friends with some people who were my own age. But I think also that was really fun and enriching, and I learnt a lot from them, I think, and probably was able to kind of grow up in lots of ways through interacting with them, in a way that would have been more difficult if I was I think school environments often not that easy to, there's often quite tight sort of boxes of the kind of person you're allowed to be with people. And so I think it sort of ebbed and flowed how much my best friends were from school and how much they were from theatre stuff, and
before we started the podcast, we were talking about your blog, and I noticed that you love quoting C.S. Lewis. And C.S. Lewis says that you know, to know someone really well, you have to spend time with them and with other people too, because different people bring out and realise different parts of who a person is. And we're currently obviously talking a bit more about your upbringing, and to the best of your knowledge, how would your parents, your friends, your teachers had described teenager Mike?
Well, I think if you asked some teachers, you would get a sigh of resigned frustration. I was very I was very confident, and well, in certain situations, I was very confident, and there was a memorable instance where I did something in a lesson that the teacher interpreted to be undermining to her in some substantial way, which in retrospect it was. I'm not sure if I meant it, but basically the punishment that I ended up getting for this was that the next lesson I had to sit out, and instead of being in the lesson with everyone else, I had to plan a bit of the lesson after that. And my teenage brain went, excellent, I'm going to be better at this than she is. And that gives you an insight into the depths of arrogance that were on display for most. I mean, it's still there. I think that by God's grace and with a lot of Rachel's help, I'm growing out of some of that. But I think that would definitely be something people would have noticed, was that I believed that I was right and that I was brilliant. I would hope that people would have noticed other things too, and I imagine my parents wouldn't have kind of dwelt on that too much. But I think, I guess creativity would probably have often been sort of a fairly defining part of what I was like.
You certainly, at times, probably didn't deserve the muffin.
100%. I spent 2 years with people coming up to me at break times and seeing me eating a muffin and going, "Do you deserve that muffin?" Which, in a way was probably good for me, but I wasn't probably responding to that in the kind of humble, existentially questioning way that I'd intended. But
I love that story because I've had a similar experience, and that was in year 11. In year 10, one of my teachers was diagnosed with Huntington's disease, and I was one of the first few people who he opened up to, and together with a friend, we thought we're going to do a fundraiser. And Huntington's disease is something that a lot of people try and hide. So a lot of people saw that he was, reacting very differently, and people were like, is he a weird guy, that kind of stuff. But actually, there was that backstory, and we organised this fundraiser, and I had the chance to announce it at the school assembly. And obviously, as you can imagine, when you announce something as, deep as this, the tone and the mood is quite sombre in the hall. And I really just want to hone in that message of collaboration, that we're all in it together, and to lively up the mood for the donation period. And I think at the end I said something like, if we change the I into we, so from individual into we, then even illness becomes wellness.
Wow. Wow.
And for 2 seconds there was just absolute silence. Everyone just bursted out into laughter, but the consequences for the rest of that year, and in fact my time at the school, everyone saw me, it was like, wellness.
Yeah. Mate, that's genius. I'm gonna use that sometime, somehow.
Defining childhood experiences, you seem, I believe you mentioned in one of our conversations that you went like a trip away, quite extended period, where you lost your passport twice. Do you mind elaborating a bit more on that story?
Yeah. So I was really lucky to be able to do a very sort of stereotypical gap year adventure. I went to Malawi for 7 months to attempt to teach in a primary school. I learnt a lot about teaching and about my own inadequacy through that experience, but also met some incredible people, and it was amazing. But yes, in the middle of that, there was a very formative experience of being an absolute idiot and managing to lose my passport by I went to visit Victoria Falls in the kind of Easter holidays with some of the others who were on the same program, and I have my passport in my rucksack because there's a bridge that's between two countries around Victoria Falls. But anyway, somebody found a place where you could go down off the path and sit right on the bank of the river just before the river goes over the edge, and it was the most remarkable place you've ever been. The sheer kind of majesty of that much water sort of roaring over the edge, and swept away in the beauty of this moment and so on and so forth. I managed to put my rucksack down and then move further along the bank and leave my rucksack, which is an incredibly stupid thing to do, and sort of look back a bit later and just realise that it wasn't there. And thereon came the most stressful night of my life in lots of ways, thinking, oh my goodness, I've lost my passport and all my money, and I'm in the middle of I'm in Zambia, I'm supposed to be in Malawi, no one is responsible for looking after me here. I've got no idea what to do. But it was actually a really deeply formative experience that night, because I found myself kind of back at the hostel that evening, sort of not knowing what to do with myself, and I ended up going and just trying to pray, and just kind of shaking and crying because I was terrified. But I had this moment where I was looking for something in the Bible that I could remember, and I found a different bit by accident, and it says sort of, fix your eyes on Jesus, who for the joy set before him endured the cross. And I remember really vividly reading that and just suddenly thinking, hang on, Jesus endured dying on the cross for me. That makes losing your passport in a beautiful tourist destination look kind of small. Like if he did that out of love and commitment to me, like, and he's with me now, like, I can cope. This is going to be okay. And it was really powerful to kind of have that moment of kind of paradigm shift of just realizing, hey, I don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. I don't know how I'm going to fix this situation. But I am confident that the big things, of who I am and who God is and what that means for my life, they are fixed, and I cannot drop them. I cannot lose them. No one can steal them. Anyway, I then went back the next day to see if someone had handed in my passport. It was Easter Sunday and I think April Fool's Day. So it was a day pregnant with possibility. And I went to the desk, the sort of tourist desk, and no one had handed anything in. And so I thought, oh gosh, okay, I'll go for plan B. I'll go back to that beautiful place and spend a bit of time, reflecting and processing. And as I walked along towards the place, I saw this kind of big family of, I think, Indian tourists were all sort of stood around looking at something. And one of them just turned around as I walked past and looked at me and said, "Is it you?" And I was like, what? And then I looked and I saw that they were holding my passport. And what had happened was, I assumed that someone had nicked my bag, taken everything that identified me out and thrown it in a bush. And these guys had just found it in a bush, and I happened to walk past as they found it. And so I was elated, obviously. And anyway, I ended up going, wow, after half an hour or so of getting to know these people and being excited and whatever, I was like, great, I'll go back to this place anyway, and I'll still spend some time, praying and whatever. And so I had this little like plastic orange Sainsbury's bag with a Bible, a notebook, and this little plastic wallet with my passport in and everything important. And I was like, right, I sat on this tree trunk and I thought, I'm not letting this out of my sight. So I put it in a little sort of hollow in the roots behind me. It's like, not letting this out of my sight. After a bit, I kind of wanted to look something up in the Bible, so I got the Bible out of the bag and I was looking at something. And then I wanted to write something, so I got my notebook out and I was writing something. And then there was a gust of wind, and I saw a flash of orange, and looked behind me and realised that the bag had gone. And literally, what I thought was a sort of dip in the roots was actually a root sort of coming around the top, but there was a gap underneath it, and the wind had caught the little plastic bag because I'd taken everything heavy out of it, blown it through the gap. It landed in the river, and I am pretty confident that it went over Victoria Falls and is now somewhere on the bottom of the Zambezi River, which is about as lost as a passport can get, I would say. So that was really quite an experience, and led to some entertaining trying to sort my life out and get an emergency passport and get back and everything. But it was a memorable experience. I thought almost as soon as it happened, I thought, well, this is the stupidest thing you've ever done, but it's also a really funny story.
Absolutely, and amongst so many things in there, I think what really stood out to me was how God and your faith was a part of it, and when you reflect upon it, it's a big part of that. And I want to continue through that theme of living as a Christian and how that affects your life on a day-to-day basis. And actually, one of my favourite blog posts that you wrote was on your day of marriage, and I really, your day of wedding, sorry. Just when you reflected on thing 1, which was joy, thing 2 you wrote was about care, and thing 3 was about love. And I loved especially about what I've read about Rachael, in particular how she had spent hours and hours hand calligraphying people's names onto their place names, and then, between you guys writing little messages to everyone. I thought, wow, what an incredible gesture that shows love and that shows that you care. You both care about other people. So when you have big moments or occasions like a wedding, how much of the planning is based upon your experiences in the religious sense, if that makes sense?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, I guess I would aspire to it being that all of it is at a very deep level. All of everything I plan or think about is at a deep level shaped by what I know of what God's like and what He's made us to be like. And so we did, when we were thinking of, we were sort of like, right, we've got to start planning a wedding. We did start by sitting down and going, what do we want this to be like? What's important to us about what this wedding is like? And that conversation really was a conversation about God, really, and like what does God value in something like this? What would it look like to do a wedding that makes people feel a little bit like they've just interacted with Jesus, even if they don't really know that that's what's just happened. And so I mean, I've learnt a huge amount from Rachael about that, and that was one of those moments, because I really, left to myself, I tend to be really task focused rather than people focused, and Rach has been a great help and challenge to me in that, because I would never have thought, it's worth the time and effort to write a little note to every person that's going to come to our wedding and put it on their place card. But actually, it was so tangible, the difference that it made to the way people related to us after dinner when they'd all seen those and read them. And I think that was really coming out of a conviction that that's what God's like, that God knows every single person individually, and that He cares about and invites in to His feast every single person. And the question is whether we accept the invitation, right? It's not whether we're invited. And I think it did do something of helping people feel like, it's not just that they sort of felt like they needed to invite some people, and I'm sure that lots of people here know, they care about them much more than me, and I'm good friends, but I'm sure I'm not as good friends as all these other people, and it's their day and they're busy and whatever. I think you could feel that people had realised, no, they like me, they want to spend time with me. And I think God, realising that about God is really transformative. Realising, hang on, he likes me and He wants to spend time with me.
I'm sure Rachel's obviously that gesture, I think, says so much about the person that she is. And when you first met her, what about her really impressed you, or what are one or two things that you've really learnt from her?
I think, yeah, I mean...
Is she Christian, sorry?
Yeah, yep. She is. And I mean, we actually met ages ago. We met her when we were 17, so both of us are very different people now to the people we were then. She's always been, like, sort of fascinating and funny and brilliantly kind of creative. Theatre was a big thing that we sort of had in common right from the start.
Yep.
One of the biggest thing I think though that I've learned from her is that that kind of capacity to deeply care about and pay attention to people. And I think I've realised through sharing life with her and seeing her relate to people, just how kind of lazy it's possible to be in relationships without realising it. And I had spent, I mean, a lot of that learning I think has happened even since we got married. So, you know, even while I was at uni, I know for a fact, actually, because of friends who've had the courage to tell me, that I was I was very task oriented, and I thought I was being very, you know, very Christian a lot of the time. But actually, when you see Jesus interact with people, he is remarkably unhurried and compassionate, and he, you know, there's a bit where he's literally on his way to heal a 10-year-old girl who is dying, and he's, you know, her dad has come to ask him to come and heal this girl. So it's incredibly urgent. He's on his way, and then a woman who's had menstrual bleeding for 12 years sort of comes up behind him in the crowd and touches him, and she's too ashamed to want to like talk to him publicly, but he stops and he turns around and he says, "Who was it that touched me?" And he takes time to basically to talk to her and to restore her dignity in the community. And he does it so tenderly, and he calls her daughter, and all of that. I think that kind of attitude to other people, I was very much keen on in theory, keen on in Jesus. But Rachael has taught me what it actually looks like to care about the person in front of you more than you do about all the things you want to get done, or the sort of ambitions that you have about this situation or whatever. And kind of really listening to people and understanding, trying to understand what's going on for them and how you can actually help them. I still feel like I'm a very sort of early days apprentice of Rachael in doing that, but yeah, she's taught me a lot.
I know you love a good metaphor.
Absolutely,
because you use them all the time in the way you speak and the way you write. And one of my top two metaphors that you use is this idea of comparing life and a dance. And the advice that you gave to one of your mates for their wedding is that, you know, marriage is ultimately about two people revolving around each other 24/7, wanting to put the other person at the centre, and in that process creating a dance that is beautiful and tender and alive. I'm sure you dance all day, but can you tell me one of the more fun dances you've had in recent times?
Do you mean literally or metaphorically? Because I'm terrible at literal dancing.
Freestyle?
Literally. Oh man. Yeah. I am awful.
I think I want to get an example of what do you mean of constantly putting other person at the centre. I mean, one example for me that comes to mind is as part of the Chinese culture. Say when you go out to eat, everyone's trying to pay. And just a simple thing that I care. No, I've got this. No, I've got this.
Yeah.
But, you know, my parents as well, you know, it's like, who goes to wash the dish? Like, you know, some families might fight not to wash it, but they're trying to finish their food earlier so that they go, let's go, I'll wash the dish now, or I'll do the laundry. And I wonder, what the dance looks like for you on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, I mean, I think washing the dishes is an absolute classic. It's that's been a lot very different since we got a dishwasher, but
who puts it in the dishwasher?
yeah, exactly. I think, well, yeah, it's been a gradual process, I think, for me learning that it doesn't just look like saying, well, no, what do you want to do? And then the other person saying, no, what do you want to do? And sort of trying to just ask the other person, because sometimes actually having choice doesn't always help us that much. It
paradox of choice, that paralysis of what to do.
And then you feel the sort of pressure
burden
of having been responsible for what you're now doing, and so actually one of the things I've learned is that sometimes what I need to do is try and trying to put Rach at the centre doesn't necessarily look like me just sort of turning up and going, right, what do you want? It takes actually me trying to think about what helps Rach to feel relaxed and to feel happy. How can I make it how can I in advance make this situation more like that? Trying to think, well, something I'm terrible at is getting home from things on time. I'm awful at, wherever I am, I always think it's really important. But actually, just, getting home from something in time that, by the time that Rachel gets home from work or whatever, it's not that the house is a tip and the dinner's running late and everything's going to be a rush for the rest of the evening. But just, doing the sort of quiet thing of getting back and sorting life out a little bit so that when you walk into that, it's kind of a peaceful kind of blank slate from which you can then build on. I guess, trying to sort of both trying to give them the priority of what what they want to do, but also kind of going the step before that.
Absolutely, very wise, and I really appreciate how open you are about reflecting on your experiences, and it's really beautiful to hear about these little instances. And I guess we inevitably need to have a deeper discussion about religion and Christianity in general. And something I really admire about you is you really do listen. You are empathetic, and you have a genuine desire, and now I know a bit more about where you developed it from school, to help other people understand religion, themselves, Jesus, and as I guess a part of your role, as part of your job, you've done so much of listening to other people as they go through their journey. So what have been common questions that you've been receiving, or what do you think is stopping people from saying that they're Christians? Have there been a trend, or is it a very much an individual answer or question?
That's really interesting. I think something that's happened sort of in the last kind of decade maybe is that it's sort of, it feels to me like there's been a shift away from the sort of very Richard Dawkinsy kind of God is the question but absolutely not is the answer kind of situation, and I think people kind of got tired of that for a number of reasons, but also it feels like more and more when I'm interacting with people who aren't Christians, it's not so much that they know lots about Christianity and they have a long list of problems with it. It's that they've never really thought much about Christianity, and it's not that it's like, if you can answer these questions, then I would accept it. It's more like, I don't even know what questions I'm supposed to be asking. And so the questions are more like, do I need God? Like, do I need there to be anything more than just, I'm living my life and I have relationships with people and I try to be a good person. And so, yeah, I guess it's coming back to actually even what I was talking about in those discussions when I was 16, 17 at school. A lot of the time I think what I've been realising I need to try and do to help people is help people think actually that the things I do care about, the things I do really value, where do I get those values from and where do I ground those values? Actually do I have a worldview that makes sense of why I care about freedom or why I care about being known and loved as the person that I am, and kind of trying to help people think through essentially do I have roots for the things that I want and care about and that I'm trying to live, or am I basically trying to live this brilliant human life without any kind of without any roots that are taking in kind of things that can fuel that and energize that, and often I think the things that we care about, even people who are not at all interested in Jesus, the things that we're passionate about and that we want, are things that actually need their roots in a relationship with God, that they kind of don't make sense in a world that doesn't have a loving God at the centre of it, but also that they're really hard to do if you don't have that kind of that root relationship of knowing that God loves you and forgives you and gives you the power to change and grow. Yeah.
So hypothetically, would you say that someone who goes to church every week, they can experience the benefits of being a part of the community, of being able to listen to other stories and to share their stories, of experiencing the practical benefits of religion, like from a pragmatic almost perspective? I guess the point I'm trying to say is a lot of people see that being religious is correlated with better well-being because of those factors, but that doesn't necessarily mean that is true. Like it could just be a story that moves people, that connects people, and some people perhaps also argue that whether or not it's true doesn't matter practically because there is an effect. And one person who might argue that is William James, former president of the American Psychological Association, who wrote The Varieties of Religious Experiences, and I think his thesis of his book is, if a person's religion succeeds in making them more whole and providing inspiration, then it works. And by that logic, and a religion is, it could be anything. It could be this God, it could be another God. How would you answer to when someone makes a point about the practical effects of religion versus the reality of whether it's true or not, if that makes any sense?
Yeah, it really does. And I definitely think that more and more the question that we're sort of wired to ask in our culture is not is it true, but is more does it work?
Yep.
And I mean, on one level, I totally agree that being part of a church family is immensely life-giving and transformative. I could not possibly quantify the difference that it's made for me and for Rach, and for so many other people that I've known. I guess the first thing I would say is, why do you think that is? If a way of living together in community that is completely shaped by the love for and belief in and teaching of Jesus turns out to lead to deep human flourishing and a kind of community that can actually sustain, intergenerational, across cultural friendships and kind of a sense of deep family, if it's deeply, deeply humanizing and good for us, that seems to me a clue that it might actually be because this is what we were made for, and because it's true. You know, that it would seem really surprising to me if it was this life-giving and it was entirely illusory. So that would be the first thing I'd say, is actually that should be a clue. And the second thing I would say is that I think deep down we do care what's true and what's not true. And I think it might work for a while to try and base your life on something that you think is useful but basically a fiction. But I think that actually, if you're going to be able to really put weight on something, you know, when things get hard, you know, when you've lost your passport in the middle of nowhere and you've got no idea how you're going to get home, it's all very well kind of thinking, well, I find this a useful practice, but it's so much deeper to think, I actually know that there is a God who is the God of the universe and who cares about me personally, cares about me so much that he became a human to take the weight of all of my guilt and failure and rebellion onto himself, die the death that I deserve so that I could live the life that I have never deserved or earned with him forever. You know, that is immensely liberating if it's true. And it gives you a kind of a strength to be able to face suffering and disappointment that is really, really profound. And if that's not true, it doesn't give you a strength that can really last if things get hard. If it's purely kind of fictional technique, then it might help for a bit, but it'll crumble when we put pressure on it. And I'm convinced that actually, if you look into it, it turns out there's lots of good reason to think it's true. And I, to be honest, became a Christian in a kind of committed, active, I really believe this sort of a way, not because I thought it would be good for my life. I think probably on some level that was going on too. I think you can't ever ignore that. But really what happened was I thought through, do I believe that Jesus really came back from the dead? Do I believe that there's a God behind the universe? And found myself convinced that was just true, in a sense, whether I liked it or not. And it turns out that that's both true and ridiculously good news.
I always find the pattern of conversion experiences quite interesting, and I'm not sure if you agree with me, but from my observation, the religious literature is filled with stories along the lines of, you know, people are so low that they're about to give up, or something horrific happens, or they're just going through a very depressing period, and there's almost this revelation of a light, you know, shining through, you know, and then they, you know, part of their, you know, negative ego, for example, become discarded, and they begin to live for other people and for some higher goal. In that, or firstly, do you agree that's a common theme of religious conversion based in the literature, or your observations?
Yeah, I think.
And if so, why is that the case?
Yeah, I think there's quite a wide variety in my experience of how people come to. I mean, I don't know a huge amount about people coming to faiths other than Christianity, and I'm sure that has very different dynamics. So I'd never want to kind of lump everything in together. But in my experience, you know, it's a really wide range. You know, I've got a friend who, you know, it was just that he just grew up in a very secular family, got to know a friend who was a Christian when he came here to uni, and just was struck that this guy actually thought about things and seemed to actually believe in God, and he hadn't expected that there was a possible combination. Started asking questions and gradually came to see that it made a lot more sense of his life than and the world than what he believed before. And I've got plenty of friends where it's been more gradual or more kind of cerebral. And I guess it different people often are driven by different, sort of tend to lead with different parts of their humanity. I guess Cambridge is particularly full of people who lead with their head.
Yeah.
Other people though really lead with their heart, and I guess it's complicated, the relationship between those things. But I do think it's not surprising that it is a common theme that people would open themselves up to God at a point where they are really sort of brought low in some way, because the whole difficult thing about Christianity is, I remember there's someone who says the only thing you need to come to God is nothing, but a lot of people don't have it. And the idea is that to come to God, actually we need to have empty hands that say, look, I can't earn your approval. It's not that I think I'm a good enough person that you really ought to approve of me, because actually that attitude gets pretty toxic pretty fast, particularly in how you think about other people. But the God of Christianity, the God of that shows himself in Jesus, the really challenging thing is that you have to admit that you are enough of a mess that God had to die for you to deal with the way that your kind of selfishness, the way that you distrust and reject him, the way that you turn in on yourself and away from others, that those things are serious, and he had to die for you to deal with it, but that he loved you so much that he was glad to die for you. And that takes humility, and I think that it's quite hard if things are going really well and you're kind of well liked and you're feeling successful. In a way, that makes it harder to get to a place where you're willing to admit, I need God's forgiveness and I need his power to change me. So it doesn't surprise me in a way that often it's when people are brought face to face with their limitedness and their weakness and their kind of need, that they're willing to kind of lift up open hands and say, I've got nothing, but I really need you. And God loves that.
Well, Mike, on that point about humility and about success and that idea of nothingness, you study English at Cambridge University, which is number 2 university in the world based on recent ranking. Many of your classmates would have applied for Magic Circle law firms. They would have done very corporate things and other stuff that perhaps society defines as what a Cambridge graduate ought to do with their degree. Why did you decide to stay in Cambridge and to serve in the role that you do now?
Yeah, thanks. I mean, to me it kind of doesn't feel like I've ever done anything particularly sort of heroic or sacrificial. I think I'm just very purpose motivated. I've always really cared about, like, I've really wanted my life to matter and to make a difference. As I said a bit ago, actually, that has had its problems. I think it's often given me an excuse to be very
idealistic.
Well, yeah, and kind of ambitious to do big things in a way that is accidentally quite happy to sort of bulldoze over some people in the process. And I think that's a real challenge of being very motivated by kind of, it's very easy for that to become a kind of ambition that looks very virtuous because it's about, I want to do something that's good and I want to make a difference in the world, but it can very easily lead you to be really actually kind of selfish and thoughtless towards the people around you, who are the main people that you're actually called to make a difference to. But one of the things that is one of the things that has made Christianity and knowing Jesus so kind of exciting for me, is this sense that Jesus genuinely invites us he doesn't just say, I will let you off for all the ways that you're a selfish mess, and I'll sort of let you into heaven when you die. It's so much better than that, in that he basically says, I'll forgive you, I'll embrace you right now, and then I want you to be part of my family. I want you to be part of my family business. I want you to be part of putting the world right and helping people to find life. And I've always, literally, we've been talking about this whole conversation, really. I've always found that immensely energizing and exciting, that I get to be part of what God's doing in people's lives. And so really the main reason that I ended up doing the stuff that I've done is that I kind of looked at, at every step I was kind of just choosing what am I going to prioritize, what am I going to give my time to. And it's always been like, I think if I do something else, I'm going to feel bored and frustrated that I don't get to do more of this. Like, how is anything else? And it's completely like, I think different Christians are called to love and serve people and love and serve God in a whole range of different ways. People get different gifts, and I'm really grateful that God's given me the opportunities that I've had to get to do this, because I just find it so exciting.
What's next, Mike?
Well, at the moment I've just started working for our church at the start of this year, trying to basically help the church to be a place where people can come and ask questions, and you don't have to be religious to get to know Jesus. And I'm finding that really exciting, and I'm pretty contentedly stuck into that for the next few years. And then I really don't know. I mean, I love creativity. If I still probably would be, if somebody, not that this is how it works, but if somebody offered me a writing career in creative stuff, I would be really excited by that. Obviously, you can't just get offered that; you have to go out and get it. So I'm trying to make time to write creatively. But I guess we'll see. I mean, like, it's one of, I genuinely think that God knows what he's doing, and it's been great fun trying to do what he wants me to do so far, and hopefully I'll work out what that is as I go along.
I want to end on 2 or 3 final questions.
Great.
And I want to draw on the metaphors that you have used in your blog. And the first one is about the window metaphor, where you, for the first time in 2 years, cleaned your window. Didn't take very long, didn't cost very much, but afterwards your flat became instantly much brighter and the world outside looked like a different colour. And what you were arguing in that blog post is, just because something is normal doesn't mean it's right. From your teaching experiences, what window do you think most people need to examine whether they need to clean?
That's a great question, and also reminds me that I now have not had my windows clean for a long time.
Which window are you looking to clean?
Yeah. I think that...
So hopefully a practical takeaway for the listeners. What can they do immediately?
I think I would really recommend for people to ask themselves, what do I care about? What do I really value? And then to ask themselves, why? Like, not just sort of autobiographically, how come I value this thing, but what's the basis for that thing? Why do I have a good reason for thinking that matters? Do I have a good reason for thinking that love is the most important thing, or that justice is real and important and we need to fight for it, or whatever it might be? Because I think we have, as a culture, we've really dangerously kind of been encouraged to give up on having a reason to believe the things that we believe. And I think that actually, if we leave that window kind of dirty and don't really bother thinking about, why do I believe this is important, it kind of it leads to a lot of problems down the road, where we don't have the kind of root and the kind of depth of understanding. And it also, I think, means that we end up running out of strength to pursue those things if we don't actually know where they're coming from.
the final one, I want to give you a chance to share the thoughts you want to share, but I'll give you a prompt, and the prompt's from your blog, and that is about Jess Gillam's virtual scratch orchestra. So during lockdown, I think she messaged or emailed a bunch of people with just sheets of music, and people from all around the world, all different races, all different instruments, totally different backgrounds, recorded themselves playing, and then that was put together and obviously made into one music video. And you mentioned about how beautiful it was, of so many people not being the same but yet the same at the same time. And in fact, that's something I have always appreciated about going to chapel, going to church, even at school, is I loved when people sing together. Like we would sing like "Tear Out My Soul," or Lord of the Dance was a really popular one.
Yeah, classic.
But it was very much people about togetherness, and I guess that's a prompt, is when people face challenges, what are some ways to be reminded of the purpose that you were talking about earlier?
Yeah, I mean, to follow your prompt there, I think that the community is hugely important in terms of as a kind of a thing that gives, like, if you're deeply connected to other people, then they are able to kind of hold you steady, or in a sense keep you moving in the direction that you are moving in together, even if, you know, all of your wheels fall off, to completely confuse this metaphor. I think, like, being in a community that is shaped by grace, and kind of not just a sense that you always have to be perfectly kind of live up to the standards of this community and always be what you aspire to be in order to be welcomed, but a community of grace that picks you up when you mess up and when you hurt the other people in the community, which is inevitable. I think that is a deep source of strength, and I think that a lot of the time we've as a culture we've been tempted to put that kind of weight exclusively on romance, and actually it can't take that. You need a family that's bigger than that, and some people have the joy of having a biological family that gets them quite a long way to that, but actually we need family in a much broader sense. So I would say that, and I guess the other big thing is, if people do know Jesus, is to talk to him and listen to him, and that was my experience in a hostel garden in the middle of the night in Malawi, in Zambia, and it has been many times since, but I recognise that's a privilege that everybody's welcome to, but I think maybe it's easier to start with community some of the time and discover the God behind it in due course.
Yeah, well, I first met you, or not met you, but first known you at one of the Eden services, I think at the end of Lent, and I didn't know who you were. I think you gave a talk about why we are meaning-seeking creatures, justice-seeking creatures, and one other one. But I was just so impressed by the way that you communicate. Oh, actually, you were sharing about your chemistry teacher saying, like, oh, if you eat a cabbage, you're going to die. Something bizarre.
Yeah.
But I feel very grateful that since then we've had a few discussions here and there, and I just want to thank you for always being so open-minded and friendly, and it takes a very special person to be genuinely curious about other people, and you're always smiling, you're always showing that humility, which shows the great character growth, sounds like. But no, it's been a pleasure, and I've learned a lot more about you, and I think there's a lot more about you that I want to learn. I hope we can continue our discussions when we bump into each other here and there in the year ahead.
That's really kind, David, and it has been. I mean, it's been a real joy getting to know you and this conversation as well. And I think it's a wonderful thing that you're doing, like actually wanting to listen to people and ask people questions. I mean, basically, I'm saying back to you a lot of what you just said to me is that I think it's a really precious value, the kind of curiosity to dig into what people believe and what people care about.
I think so, and I think when I listen back to this one, I'm just reflecting on it now. It's not my most eloquent one at all. Obviously, we didn't prepare anything, and partly because maybe it's exams, just finishing it, and maybe a bit of hay fever doesn't help. But I think that's also quite beautiful that we can just sit here and talk without worrying about it being perfect.
Yeah.
And there's just that sense of chaosness and unpredictability that comes from it, and that's what I've really enjoyed about this. And yeah, I'm very happy that we've had this discussion. Yeah, well, thank you so much again, and I'll see you around, Mike.
Thank you, David. It's been a real joy.